We have next, blessing our airwaves of this main stage, is George Siosi Samuels, who is a Fractional Chief Community Officer. Let's go with the fractionals and the C-suite of community, and three-time Polynesian tech founder. He's been involved with micropayment technologies since 2013, introduced blockchain to a micro nation, and founded a Web3 startup. He's been a professional community builder for the last 10 years, but now uses emerging tech and ancient wisdom, oh yeah, to empower micropreneurs. Currently, he's coaching micropreneurs and scaling companies through his own agency, Faiā. And please, George, correct that pronunciation if and when possible. So, sponsored by Gradual, George will be regaling us with how blockchain micropayments will transform online communities. George, it is all yours.
Thank you very much, Victoria. Great introduction. And this means I won't have to introduce myself formally in the presentation, which saves us time. But yes, thank you so much. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. Been watching some of the presentations, and this is great. And you're doing a great job hosting. And you did also a very good job of saying Faiā, so that it's perfect. So I guess I'll get started, and I'll just share my screen. And away we go. If anybody has any questions, please just put them into the chat. This may be very geeky, very nerdy on this topic, but I think it's very important for people to understand what is going on in the background of this space. So let's get into it. So how blockchain-based micropayments will transform online communities long-term. So just a quick overview. I'll do an introduction. Actually, I might skip this because Victoria already did such a great job of introducing me. I'll be talking about blockchain itself, because for a lot of people, I think there's still a lot of confusion around what it is or what it does. I'll then tie it into not only online communities, but micro communities. And then I'll be talking about the future, where how I see blockchain and communities, and then also a bit of AI, how those all come together in the not too distant future. All right, so yeah, the intro. So yes, I'm a tech founder. Also, I'm the managing director of Faiā, the agency that I currently run, which is a community and tech agency. Our specialty is in helping people, build communities, but also with a very strong expertise in emerging tech. And yeah, this started with blockchain, has naturally led itself into the AI space as well, but that is the overlap. Yeah, been working with communities for the last 10 plus years, featured on Discover Mag, entrepreneur.com, Tech in Asia. And I think it was mentioned by Victoria that I had introduced blockchain to a micronation. So Tuvalu. Tuvalu is actually from my mother's side. My mother is Tuvaluan Samoan. My dad is Fijian Indian. And that is how the connection came in terms of introducing the technology and doing a pilot with the nation of Tuvalu. And if you've ever heard or kind of following along with climate change news, Tuvalu is often kind of shared as one of those nations that may sink if ocean levels continue to rise. But with that, good segue into blockchain itself. So actually, before I go into this, it might be good if in the chat, if you have a moment, what do you think blockchain means? Go ahead and put your answer into the chat. Try to be as simple and succinct as possible, and I'll give maybe 20 seconds. And then after that, I will go in and talk a bit about blockchain itself. And I hope I can see the chat on my end. Okay, cool. So I think I just got notified that I won't be able to see the chat. So I'm just going to assume that there are messages happening in the chat itself right now. Great. And some people have, perfect. So it looks like some people have put in their answers, and I'm going to go into it now. All right. So a blockchain, from a very general standpoint, this is one of the more formal definitions on Investopedia. And it is a digital database or ledger that is distributed among the nodes of a peer-to-peer network. Now, if you look at all of the different blockchains that exist in the market right now, they'll all kind of have a little variation of this. Some people in the early days would call blockchain a glorified database. And in many ways it is, but it's the implementation of blockchain technology that actually made projects like Bitcoin, then Ethereum, that much more interesting. So blockchain is just one part of the system for a lot of these different cryptocurrency projects. But when it comes to blockchain, I usually like to use the analogy of a Google sheet or a spreadsheet, right? One that's in the cloud. And you see over here, I've actually put, if you've ever used Sheets, there is a version history portion of a document. And you actually have a timestamp of all the different variations of your document. And that's essentially what a blockchain does in the background, but for all any and possible data transactions. Okay. The way I think most people have been using blockchain to date has been in the form of the currency itself. But blockchain technology enables micropayments, and some even say nanopayments, to the point where really everything that we currently take for granted with the internet could be micro or nano payments, right? So you just imagine that every time, if you sent a WhatsApp message, or even what we're doing right here with the live stream, every single data packet, all of these would be payments. And I'll explain later on why this matters in the future with new systems like AI and LLMs, etc. Okay, but generally I like to use the Google Spreadsheets analogy because it's something that exists, it's something visual, and you can start to get an idea of how these timestamps are literally entries on the blockchain ledger. There is a great video on YouTube by Westpac Bank from Australia that talks also a bit about the history of blockchain and where some of these concepts came from. I think depending on who you speak to, different people will talk about different origin points. But there was a fascinating origin story about blockchain that came from the South Pacific area, which is, part of my heritage. And that came with the Yapese people. And so the history goes that they were kind of the first to play around with the concept of a blockchain. And what they did is they took these rye stones, these massive blocks, stone blocks. They used that as their currency, but they did something very interesting. So although they had these physical rye stones on their islands, this is for the Yapese people. Whenever they wanted to transact something, everybody would come together, I think, to the center of the village and literally memorize portions of the rye stones and the transactions that took place. Right? So you can imagine how complex this may be, but also how much they would need to rely on their own memories. And the way it would work is essentially if anybody remembered something different or forgot, then the transaction was invalid. And this is very similar to the way that blockchains work today in terms of their payment mechanism or their verification mechanism. Obviously, for obvious reasons, this system didn't scale well, right? Because it kept requiring people to meet and share their memory of transactions. But fast forward from I think around 500 AD to now, we have the technology to be able to do this at scale. And so this is where it's very interesting. Small world networks. So this is more of it's a type of network topography. So if you've ever taken computer science or anything related to IT and networks, you might have seen this before, but if you haven't, that's okay. With small world networks, it's essentially a fancy way of talking about how the small world effect works, right? If you've ever bumped into somebody in a faraway city or a faraway country, and you feel like there's no possible way that we should have, bumped into each other in this large, massive world of ours. Well, this is part of the small world effect. And this small world network design is actually part of not only blockchain, but systems like Bitcoin. Okay. And so if you want to geek out about this, feel free to look up small world networks and more specifically mandala networks, because these type of networks actually suit communities in general. Because what it means is that instead of having a large open network, systems like Bitcoin actually benefit from smaller, more intimate network nodes talking to each other. This is actually part of how trust is built into systems like Bitcoin. And again, I'm using Bitcoin because it's kind of the most popular, but if you have any questions about the others, feel free to ask away. So yeah, I had mentioned the small world effect, right? And this is something that is also connected to the 6 degrees of separation. I believe there's a movie of the same name or that talks about the 6 degrees of separation. But in today's world for LinkedIn, you'll notice that they only have 3 degrees of connections. And they found that in our digital world, you only actually need 3 degrees of connections to be able to get to people that you want to get to who know people that you know at a 1st degree level. And so the small world networks here in this image, you'll see that when it comes to network topography, increasing randomness happens when the networks get larger and larger. A small world network sits in a good middle place between a regular network and a large random one, right? And actually the small world network is where communities thrive. And this is why I wanted to talk about it. Okay, so in a nutshell, systems like Bitcoin actually thrive off of a community setup, but just for payments themselves. Okay, so the next portion of this is that I want to talk about is NFTs, Web3, and ordinals. This, you may have seen or heard of these acronyms, these terms before, and it's very interesting because at around 2020, when NFTs hit the scene, communities were all the rage. And for anyone creating a business in this ecosystem, essentially it was mandatory to create a community. Like you could not thrive without building a formal community around your project in any of these spaces. And this still remains, but there were some interesting behavioral things that took place. I think, of course, greed took over a lot. And a lot of people were manipulating these community groups by just spamming them with bots. And as a result, a lot of these groups died out because many of them didn't necessarily understand the fundamentals of community building and how it's very much a long-term play, and you cannot spam them with bots, because eventually the members, the real members, they know when they're not real, right? And so this is the interesting intersection between the technology and human beings in general with these type of ecosystems. So if you haven't heard of ordinals, essentially ordinals are NFTs on Bitcoin. Okay, NFTs became very popular on cryptocurrencies like Ethereum, but ordinals became a lot more popular on Bitcoin. And this is because a lot of people didn't realize that you could build or do a lot more than just invest or speculate in BTC. And the Bitcoin as a technology can actually do a lot more. But that's a much more political discussion, which I'll probably have to say for another time. But essentially, with this ecosystem, you cannot thrive in it without actually having knowledge of managing or building good communities. They kind of go hand in hand. And so that's why this is a very fascinating space, and one that continues to evolve, even if things have died down at this point in time. Okay. So I'm just going to move on to the next one. A little bonus. Some of you may have heard of DAOs before. A DAO stands for decentralized autonomous organizations. And I think the idea is very appealing to many people. But the reality is that it kind of highlighted the difficulty of creating a truly decentralized autonomous organization, right? Because as soon as you bring people into any sort of democratic process, right, which requires them to vote, there is something that occurs, which is called voter apathy. So if you have to vote on every single decision within this organization, voters essentially get tired of it, right? And so the idea with a DAO, a truly decentralized autonomous organization, this is where AI would probably come in, and where you'd have these machines making these autonomous decisions on your behalf. But in democratic societies like we have now, this is why we also vote for representatives. So in the whole decentralized movement of the blockchain space, a lot of the communities kind of were like, oh yes, more power to the people. then quickly realized, oh, well, this is why certain rules, laws, and regulations exist, because it's actually quite difficult to get people to show up to vote, and let alone vote on every single minute decision. All right. I do wish I could see the chat, but that's okay. I'll just rely on Victoria and the team to send me any questions that pop up as I'm speaking. So let's go to the next section. Micropayments. Okay, so this is where it starts to tie into the online community side, right? So if any of you are on Twitter or X, you may have noticed a lot of changes as a result of Elon Musk. I know that he's a very controversial figure. Some people hate him, some people love him, but I just try to look at the changes themselves. And I gotta say, Twitter, formerly X, is a platform that people need to pay attention to, because essentially Elon Musk is looking to turn it into a like WeChat for the West. And if you look at the success of WeChat in China and Asia itself, they are way ahead. And so what is going to come in with a platform like X is micropayments. And the micropayments aspect is where I've already seen how that influences online community behaviors. So let me just go into full screen mode so we can see this image. So you can see this highlighted a bit here. I think a lot of people focus on how X might do micropayments. And this is imperative because the micropayments infrastructure will disrupt advertising models like crazy. So just imagine that every time you are on a platform like X, when you like, when you reply, when you reshare, they are small payments of say 5 cents, 2 cents, 1 cent, maybe even less than a cent. Blockchain infrastructure actually allows this to be possible, because in our current payments infrastructure world, if you were to make a 1 cent payment, there's a fee that the banks or platforms like Stripe, etc., will take, but they're so small and so minuscule that like it becomes a loss leader. It becomes kind of unfeasible to actually deal with. And you can only imagine from an accounting perspective how this would get very complicated very fast. So this is something that Elon Musk is looking into, and it would actually provide creators a new way to get paid. So instead of requiring 5 million impressions, right, to unlock subscriptions or even to start to get paid through ad revenue, you could start getting paid from the get-go as a small account if one of your posts happens to go viral. So you can imagine if, say, your post gets, I don't know, 1,000 likes, right? And if each one is, say, worth 5 cents, then you do the math on that, okay? So this is where it actually becomes very important for communities in the future, because it's gonna start bringing money in to relationships, right? And essentially, if you have a tighter relationships, tighter engagement with your own community, then it means that you could potentially be earning a lot more as well, because the value may be perceived to be higher. And this is an example right here in this image of a platform that does use micropayment infrastructure. It's actually a Twitter clone called Twetch. So that is TWETCH. And you can see here, 80 likes. This person earned $3.21 already from their post. Okay. And yeah, it's a very interesting area. Okay, second section. And I will do a time check on myself as well. So micro communities. So what is a micro community? Some of you may have heard about this before, but I had called this out about a year ago, saying that micro communities are going to become more of a thing. And this is because I've been involved in the micropayments world for a good while. And a micro community is typically a community of less than 30 members. And often they're part of an online course, an online coaching group, or a larger virtual community. But as the technology evolves, I think we are seeing a trend where people are actually desiring smaller communities, because one, it's part of trust. When there are smaller communities, you have higher intimacy. You're able to build more meaningful connections. Naturally, when groups get larger, the threads between each other also get stretched. And so people then start to maybe not care as much or become lurkers, right? And this was taken from a recent group called Misfits. And this group was actually created as a result of the HubSpot takeover of Trends, because it looks like HubSpot now is kind of changing the Trends Facebook group, and Sam Parr, who originally created Trends, is creating a new group. And this message reflects the sentiment of a lot of community groups now, right? That got too large. A lot of people want them to become private, and this lends itself directly to blockchain and micropayments as well. And I'll talk more about this shortly. School.com, some of you have heard about this. If you are a community person and have not, I highly recommend you take a look at the School ecosystem, because there are a lot of paid communities that are actually popping up there. And it's one to look out for, in all honesty. I won't go too much into there, but this is a good case study for the growth of private paid communities. On the monetization side of these communities, there was a podcast by Arvid Kahl. Some of you may know him, and he talks about monetizing micro communities as well already. So if you just add the micropayments infrastructure to these type of micro communities in the future, I think we're going to see an explosion of very profitable micro niches for a large majority of people who work online and who just want to enjoy their lives, get paid for it, and stay small without having to worry about needing to scale up in terms of numbers of members and stuff, and having revenue or stress be affected. You could actually increase the revenue while intentionally staying small. And this is why I'm a big proponent of micropreneurship in general. This is just an example of micropayments applied to community groups. So there is a platform called Board, so BOARDZ, and that actually has a micropayments infrastructure embedded. And just imagine Reddit with the ability to get paid for upvoting, downvoting, replying, etc., from a very basic level. Okay, so the future. This is where I'm going to try and bring everything together. So in a nutshell, what we're going to see as a result of the combination of blockchain, micro communities, and I'll talk about AI shortly, is that we're going to see a lot more private paid micro communities. And I think in a world where we have more digital nomads, more remote workers, and I think more people just wanting to be able to earn a living without needing to become the next, Amazon or Facebook, this is going to appeal to a lot of folks around the world. And nas.io, thank you, Victoria, I got 2 minutes. nas.io is one to watch. They help you manage communities across Telegram, WhatsApp, Discord, and manage that in a very efficient manner. Common Room for the analytics side, to look at a community everywhere, which is the title of this summit. Common Room, I think, is also going to be one for you to watch, because they'll help you to manage the community or member journey across the board. Data rights and ownership, I won't go too much into this because this is a large topic, but essentially with blockchain, with communities, you want to be able to actually have an audit trail of all of your information while being able to maintain your privacy. For small groups, this will mean that they will have a lot more power in a court of law with a blockchain micropayments infrastructure. Okay, not going to go into that because it's a big one. Finally, AI blockchain communities. In the future, there is already AI being applied to capturing our dreams. Can you imagine a collection, a database that has all of our dreams that can be analyzed, but you get to determine whether you want other people access to it or not? In a micropayments infrastructure or future, other people, every time they access your data, you get paid. That is the type of future that we're looking for. But this it could be a whole topic in and of itself, but I wanted to share it there with you because this is where all three communities, AI and blockchain, actually come together. And I'm going to stop there. So Victoria, if you have any questions, we can go through them. But thank you very much.
Hey, George. Okay, first of all, you're blowing our minds. Okay, our minds are collectively blown. They are blowed in the chat. So when you get back over to Gradual, you'll be able to see how much chatter there is and conversational points and things about NFT communities and so on. We are at time for the questions, but I did just want to say to you in your final point about capturing dreams, it's giving Black Mirror. Okay,
yes,
that's what it's giving me. So it's
100%.
sounding, the future of it all is the wild, wild west, the open frontier. And it sounds like it's up to us to create some guardrails if and when that is even a possibility. So
100%.
with that, because the questions probably are going to take up quite a bit of time to answer, I'm going to let you handle that in the chat and gradual.
Okay.
But thank you so much for regaling us with a lot of information people had heard about, but didn't know the jargon around, didn't know how the things were connected. So thank you for connecting those dots for us and bringing in that ancient wisdom, the mandala. Okay, my man. We'll have a separate conversation.
Let's do it.
But until then, see you in the airwaves. Thank you, George.
Thank you.